Hey, joining me now via Skype from Vancouver is Deepak Anand, who's now the CEO and co-founder of Materia Ventures. Deepak, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I am great. So you've got a new corporate gig.
I do, yes.
Tell us about that.
So Materia Ventures is a company set up to deal with the supply and distribution market in Europe. We've got a number of supply and distribution agreements in place in Germany, in the UK, in Italy, and a variety of other countries.
Really? So you've been traveling the world. You're probably one of the most knowledgeable people when it comes to new rules and new places. Where do you see the most interesting stuff happening in terms of what new rules are coming out now? Like, where are there new rules happening?
A variety of different countries coming up, James, with a variety of countries coming online. Thailand, as you know, recently said they're going to allow for this to happen and be cultivated in Thailand. In addition to that, we're paying very close attention to Luxembourg that said they're going to be legalizing not just medical but also recreational cannabis. Gibraltar, the island of Gibraltar, is looking at cannabis legalization quite seriously. And Laos is another country that seems to be moving forward. So many new jurisdictions coming online soon here.
Oh, very cool. Have you done anything in Peru? I hear Peru's coming online now.
Yes, Peru seems to be, really gaining some movement. We've seen a couple of licensed producers set up supply there. Fire and Flower, I think, recently made an announcement that they were doing something there. We've got our eyes on it, and we've got some agreements that we'll be putting into place very shortly here.
Oh, very good. Okay, so you also are on now the board of Chemesis International.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. So how'd you land that gig, and what's happening with Chemesis?
Chemesis is up to a variety of different things. I recently joined their board last week. I've known a couple of the founders and operators really well. They seem to be doing a number of things in Colombia and Latin America. Many announcements to come soon. They're obviously very involved in the CBD side. I just look at CBD and you look at the opportunity globally, and this is something that is propelling at an insane rate. Whilst Canada has a number of restrictions around what you can do with CBD, the U.S. market seems to be, opening up. You heard Bruce Linton recently talk about New York and the opportunities in New York for CBD. I look at this on a global scale, particularly Europe, where Materia is based, and that market too has a tremendous potential. And I think what Chemesis is doing is setting up a number of Latin American assets to take advantage of the CBD market, and they've got some very interesting assets and announcements coming out in place. Okay,
fantastic. Tell me, what is the landscape going to look like for the international trade in cannabinoids, CBDs, dried flower? I mean, at this point, it seems like, yes, Canada can export to Europe, and certain countries can import from anywhere. The United States is, for all intents and purposes, a closed border at this point, except for research purposes. But what is that whole international trade going to look like in cannabis? And when is it going to evolve into something that more resembles normal international trade?
Yeah, unfortunately, James, you're right. There's not going to be much trade, at least between Canada and the U.S. Anytime soon on medical cannabis. Recently, there was a couple of things that happened that seem to be moving in the right direction, although these things are going to take years before they actually develop. The WHO, which is the World Health Organization, released a report and talked about amending the scheduling of cannabis. Right now, it's in a very restrictive schedule. The weird sort of part of this is that while CBD was never really under any schedule, most people assumed that CBD was scheduled. It was actually never under a schedule. It was the up to 0.3% THC part that remained in schedules, and a number of countries were not permitted to trade in anything that had CBD because it contained either between 0.1 or 0.3% of THC. And so the World Health Organization has sort of, one of the things that they've recommended is completely removing that element of up to 0.3 milligrams percent of THC to be taken off the schedule. In addition to that, they've looked at rescheduling of cannabis so that it can be dealt with, differently, and especially on the THC side, that more research can happen. These things are going to take, 4 or 5 years to figure out if that. But nonetheless, these are steps in the right direction. If you look at Europe, on the other hand, that's where, the reason we've set up Materia is there's a lot of opportunity in that market. CBD is a novel food in that jurisdiction. If you walk across, pharmacies in the UK, you'll see CBD-based products on shelves. They don't make any sort of claims in terms of health claims, but you'll see everything from creams to ointments to balms to tinctures in a variety of different forms available in the UK. In Germany, it's even sort of further than that. You see shampoos and you see ointments and you see a variety of different things with CBD. So Europe's really got some interesting opportunities, and because of this trade across borders, because Europe is considered one market from a customs union perspective, you can move CBD from Bulgaria and Romania into Germany and other markets, and that seems to be what people are doing right now. So there's certainly a sophisticated market for CBD and some real opportunities in that space.
All right. Will the World Health Organization rescheduling of THC and CBD, they've declined to do that at the most recent meeting, but is that something that will really have an effect on opening up international borders?
Once these things shake out, James, it is most likely going to do that. The World Health Organization only makes recommendations. There's a Commission on Narcotic Drugs called the CND, which most countries are signatory to, and this is a group that works within the UN. And the challenge becomes is we're signatory to treaties on the UN that was signed in 1961 and 1971 that were the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs, and this body, the CND, is the one that would be responsible for amending of those regulations should they choose to go with what the World Health Organization is recommending they do. We've got a meeting coming up here shortly in the next month. There will be a variety of other meetings. These things seem to happen on a consensus basis versus a voting basis, and you've got a number of countries like Saudi Arabia and Russia that will continue to oppose these things, but we're getting momentum. With the number of countries that are coming online looking at scheduling medical cannabis, at least we're moving in the right direction as far as the international policy arguments are concerned. Another thing of interest, James, is the European Union and the EC Commission recently said that they want to come up with a harmonized framework for all 27 member states to follow. That's another thing that we're watching very closely, because that will have impact on how countries go about legalizing medical cannabis within the European Union, and they're moving towards that as well.
Okay, so it's looking more and more like, at this point anyways, that the U.S. is really like the third world country in this whole thing, in that, they've got this problem where they can legalize it in states where there's not a sort of moral majority issue, but they can't, for the life of them, reflect the majority's consensus in a national policy, which is ultimately going to hurt them very, very much financially in terms of the missed opportunity, and to the point where we've seen certain entrepreneurs in the United States publish full-page ads in the likes of the Wall Street Journal imploring the president to do something so that the U.S. doesn't miss out on this great economic boon that the rest of the world is jumping all over. Is there any indication that the U.S. is going to soften its stance on a national basis anytime soon?
Oh, it doesn't look like it. On the one hand, you've got the FDA, which is the Food and Drug Administration, sending out a whole bunch of warnings to people that are dealing with CBD, especially saying you can't really add it to food. This rolls back a number of things that states have done. So on the one hand, you've got the Food and Drug Administration that's got a very aggressive sort of stance on this. But on the flip side, you've got a number of political parties, leading up to the next election, really making an issue out of this. We saw John Boehner just yesterday come out and say that, he thinks that we've held back on research by sort of controlling the way that cannabis has been regulated. I think this is going to become an election issue for the next election, and I think that's when you'll see the pendulum shift. I caution people that probably think that the U.S. is not going to be a significant player. Keep in mind these MSOs or multi-state operators are very sophisticated in what they're doing. They're slowly but surely really ramping up their production. You look at it from a branding and a marketing perspective. I mean, California is doing a fantastic job as far as brands are concerned. So the day that switch is flipped, the U.S. is going to be a significant power. I mean, there's a number of massive cannabis multi-state operators that are functioning within the U.S. that would really light up the world once they're allowed to do that. So I expect that to happen fairly shortly, at least on a medical perspective.
Sure. Okay. Great, Deepak. Well, I can't wait to see you in the flesh again. When are you coming to Toronto next?
Soon, next month, I'm going to be speaking at the BMO Investor Conference, so I'm sure we'll catch up with you then.
Perfect. Most definitely. All right, Deepak, we'll leave it there. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.